Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Greenland's residents, nearly all of whom are Indigenous Inuit, are closely watching talks in Paris this week as the territory's prime minister works alongside Denmark's leader to bolster European support. President Donald Trump's recent threats to take over the autonomous territory are reviving worries related to America's imperialistic past that had major consequences for Indigenous people. Similar worries are surfacing in other sovereign nations like Cuba and Colombia. We'll hear more right after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Antonia Gonzalez. On January 27th of last year, San Carlos Apache teenager Emily Pike went missing from a Mesa, Arizona group home. Her dismembered remains were discovered a month later in garbage bags more than 100 miles away. No arrests have been made nor suspects named. Earlier this month, a memorial in Mesa marking where Emily was last seen alive got taken down. As KJZZ's Gabriel Pietrazio reports, it's the latest rallying cry for justice in the 14-year-old girl's unsolved murder.
Who are we here for?
Emily Pike!
Then say her name!
Emily Pike!
Say her name!
Emily Pike!
Say her name!
At the corner of Mesa Drive and McKellips Road, dozens of demonstrators met on a recent Saturday as cars drove by honking their horns.
Justice for who?
Emily Pike!
Who do we love?
Emily Pike!
Who do we love?
This is where Emily was last seen alive.
Only secrets in their diary. Girls gone missing is a national inquiry.
Since her disappearance, a chain-link fence hugging the edge of a 28,000 square foot vacant lot has become home to a roadside memorial for the slain Apache teen. Visitors from near and far have flocked to this bustling intersection, adorned with flowers, stuffed animals, a banner of Emily's face, and lots of red ribbons. That was until someone suddenly took everything down earlier this month. No matter who did it, Jolene Shorty is still upset.
You took down her stuff. There is a respectful way. There is a traditional way to let things go. This is not the way.
For Shorty, she says this is the second tragedy to happen there.
I see a clean slate to start over. In a way, they almost helped us. We're going to come back and put up more stuff. We're going to honor them the way we're supposed to.
Delvina Charlie, who is Dene, thinks taking down those mementos adds insult to injury.
This is the respect that we got. We're pushed to the side that our voices meant nothing, that she meant nothing. If this was a different, privileged girl, it would have been handled differently.
Since the items were taken down, Emily's family has been in talks with the city of Mesa on planting a tree and placing a bench at Fitch Park, just a few blocks from her last known location. Jared Marquez is San Carlos Apache and treasurer of the Turtle Island Women Warriors.
I've been there. Being a 13-year-old kid, never talking to my parents, running around on the reservation, nobody ever truly caring. And it's hard to think what this girl went through, a lot of us could have been through.
As for the investigation into Emily's murder, KJZZ asked the FBI, the Bureau of Indian Affairs Missing and Murdered Unit, and the lead agency, Gila County Sheriff's Office, for the status, but did not receive any updates. For National Native News, I'm Gabriel Pietrazio reporting from Mesa.
The National Congress of American Indians and the Native American Rights Fund are hosting a webinar titled Know Your Rights, followed by Q&A on Wednesday to provide practical guidance for tribal citizens on interactions with ICE. The organizations say it's in response to growing concerns from across Indian country. I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
National Native News is produced by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Tribal Development Partners, helping tribes build toward their goals through 105L leasing and essential facility development, empowering sovereignty, strengthening community. More at tribaldevpartners.com, proud supporters of this show.
Hear that? Tribal college faculty do so much, one can't say it all here. Nothing but respect. Visit mostthoroughdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. President Donald Trump's threats to take control of Greenland is sending shockwaves across the globe. It has put the United States standing with the 80-year-old NATO alliance at risk. And within the territory itself, Greenland's residents worry what American control based on oil and mineral development and strategic positioning means for them. Similar worries are surfacing in Cuba, Colombia, and even Canada and Mexico, as the Trump administration puts those sovereign countries on notice. For Indigenous people in those countries and at home, the momentum for imperialistic ambitions is a reminder of a dark history that the United States has yet to reconcile. We're talking about modern American imperialism today. And of course, listeners, you can join us. Give us a call. The number is 1-800-996-2848. You can share your perspectives on the air. Again, that number is 1-800-996-2848 or just 1-800-99-NATIVE. Joining us now from Nuuk, Greenland is Dr. Sarah Ulsvig. She is the chair of the Inuit Circumpolar Council and holds a Ph.D. in Arctic Studies and is a former parliament member in both Greenland and Denmark. She is Inuk from Greenland. Sarah, hello, and welcome to Native America Calling.
Hello. Very good to be on the air with you. I've been looking forward to engaging in this dialogue.
I have too, Sarah. Thank you again for joining us. Joining us from Copenhagen, Denmark, is Malu Rosing. She is an advisor on Arctic and global governance for the International Workgroup for Indigenous Affairs. Malu, hello, and welcome to the show to you as well.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Joining us from Tucson, Arizona is Andrea Carmen. She is the executive director of the International Indian Treaty Council. She is Yaqui. Andrea, good morning and welcome back to the show.
Very good morning and greetings to the other presenters. Hello, Sarah. It's great to hear you, and I look forward to what you have to share.
And we have a fourth guest on the show who also joins us from Nuuk, Greenland, Tilly Martinussen. She is a former member of Greenland's parliament. Tilly, hello. Wonderful to have you on the show today as well.
Yes, thank you. I'm a little hoarse because I'm coming down with a little bit of flu, but let's just go ahead, and it's nice to be here. Nice to talk to you guys.
Yeah, appreciate you hanging in there for us, Tilly. I'm going to go ahead and start with you. Now, there is a framework for an agreement following President Trump's bold assertion that America would take over Greenland. Now, the rhetoric has cooled somewhat. Does that provide any sense of relief for you right now?
Well, I'm not sure that you can say that it has cooled down some, because he also kind of the day, I think it was yesterday, that Donald Trump once again said nothing less than 100% ownership, and then nobody knows about what, right? If it's like pockets of land, or if it's all of Greenland, I'm thinking all of Greenland, is nothing less than that is acceptable. So we feel like he has backed off on the military force, but on the other hand, we have had a treaty with the United States since 1951, where there was a lot of things that they could do militarily, security-wise, that he has been talking about, and he has not adhered to that. So international law and stuff like that apparently isn't his thing. So I don't think that anyone really trusts him. That's at least my notion, and everyone that I talk to here are feeling threatened by this still, but of course we're breathing a little bit easier right now. There was like reaching a little bit of a fever pitch before Davos, I think, in the general population, and then, but we're not out of the woods, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Feeling threatened, as you describe it. Tilly, what are the main concerns here from an Inuit perspective?
Well, first of all, of course, that they would do the same as we've seen that has been done to the Native Americans and the Inuit that are residing in Greenland. No, sorry, in the United States. The land would be taken away. We would be put into reservation. Maybe we would have our culture and our language somehow stripped away slowly, either by soft overtake, I was almost saying, and or by influence or maybe even violence, as we're seeing right now. Members of Native American tribes are being kidnapped, right, by ICE agents, and they're being put away. And we have heard that, I know the Pine Falls, I think, Indians it was. That tribe was asked to concede land in exchange for 3 of their tribal members. I mean, of course, when we're seeing this, it's equally disturbing as it has been to see what the past has been like. Also, all of the Inuit women that we have seen disappear and frankly being murdered, and children as well in Alaska over a long span of time, to be honest. And we're not really seeing the resolve to solve those crimes, right? The same way. And lastly, I would say a lot of people are looking down on, a lot of, at least Donald Trump's and his kin and his alikes are looking so much down on Native Americans and Indigenous people in the United States. And of course, it's a long history, but I feel like it's picking up again. I don't know how you feel over in the United States.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of our listeners can really relate to what you're explaining, Tilly, and appreciate that you're paying close attention to what's happening here in the States. Now, back to this talk of a takeover of Greenland. Now, the rhetoric is, and what a lot of us hear from the Trump administration, is that Americans can just walk onto the country and take control of the land and have authority over Greenland's people. Is it that simple? What would really need to happen?
I would say not. As it is of now, we're a part of the Kingdom of Denmark, and through that, we're actually a NATO country. And as you know, one attack on a NATO country is an attack on all. However, I don't think they ever made any declarations in the NATO alliance where it said if it was one NATO country attacking another. We have seen a lot of show support, I think, from a lot of Europeans, Canada, European Union, as well as Denmark, actually going forward in this, even though they're a former colonizer. So, everything I think is up in the air as it is right now, but it's not as easy as we thought it was, number one. And number two, I also think that because the tensions are so high, and because Donald Trump is talking about Cuba as well, he's talking about Canada and everything else, it's kind of getting the rest of the countries to huddle up together, of course, with Greenland, because if we fall, then who's next? Then he will just be going around like a new colonist with his imperialistic ideas and being just like Putin was in Ukraine, right? And taking force off the table, by the way, was not something that I heard I will rule out military force, yeah, but you still want to invade, right? So are you going to do it another way? Soft overtake, trying to influence people. He's been talking about buying Greenlanders, which was so insulting. There are so many questions in this and so many unbeknownst. And of course, because it's Donald Trump, it's even worse. We are seeing that he's surrounding himself with a lot of white supremacists. I have to say it like it is. I'm sorry.
Tilly, a lot of the media, especially here in the United States, has been really focused specifically on President Trump and the Danish Prime Minister. But what do we need to understand about the population of Greenland and their concerns, and what is being left out of these dialogues that the media is covering?
Yeah, so that is one thing that frequently annoys me. But of course, in the United States, Donald Trump is doing so much to threaten and to silence and subdue media. So I think that's probably part of it, why you're seeing the news that you are. I know that we also have had a lot of parading around of some few individuals who are very pro being a part of the United States, which is not at all what the Greenlandic people wanted to a year ago. We did a survey, only 6% wanted to be a part of the United States. I would guess right now that the number has gone way down since there's been so much stress on our small country. We're only 57,000 people here. in Greenland, and we're around 18,000 to around roughly 30,000 if you count first or second generations in Denmark. And we're an indigenous people recognized by the United Nations. So we're in the charters and everything like that. But I also know that because I know about American history, I know that America has never really fully incorporated all of that into any of their laws, and they don't really care, as we're seeing right now. So,
Tilly, I thought it was interesting. A moment ago, you referenced President Trump's offer or just his words about possibly buying Greenland, and you described that as insulting. And that's relevant because the president has said American control of Greenland could offer financial opportunity and freedom from Danish control. Does that message at all resonate with the citizens of Greenland right now?
it doesn't. It doesn't, and it doesn't with me. Of course, I can't speak for everyone, but I'm pretty sure that, as I mentioned, it's fewer than 6% probably by now that wants to be a part of America, I would guess. It doesn't resonate at all. First of all, it's not something that we believe, because every time Mr. Trump is opening his mouth, he seems to be lying. Second of all, we all know how he feels about anyone else than rich Christian and white people, and I don't think he doesn't value like you and me or anyone else very highly. Mostly himself, to be honest, probably. And lastly, I would have to say, Greenlanders. Let me put it like this, and I know that everyone who is Indigenous at least will understand. Would you be able to buy your language? Would you be able to buy your culture? I mean, what price would that be? The price is way too high, no matter what it is, right? Would you be cast into poverty? Would you have your land robbed? I know that you have that in your history, a lot of you over there in the States. I mean, if you could do that all over again, of course not. It's not for sale in any way, shape, or form. And when we were talking to the media and they're referencing only the Prime Minister of Denmark, is also like a testament to we have our own Prime Minister here. His name is Jens Frederik Nielsen. He's a very good Prime Minister, and he's actually being coordinated by the Danish Prime Minister all along the way, I know. And still they're referencing it like Denmark owns Greenland. That is also something that, I mean, I'm not that touchy, but I mean, when I heard that every time,
Tilly, we need
like,
to take a short break. Take a short break, and we'll come back and we'll talk more. Friends, relatives, and colleagues are reflecting on the life of the man who propelled Indigenous journalism in Canada. Dan David founded the APTN and reshaped newsrooms in apartheid South Africa. We'll hear about his legacy and explore the end of publishing for the Lakota Times. That's on the next Native America Calling.
Every family caregiver could use help finding the necessary resources to care for their loved one. The AARP Family Caregiver Resource Guide helps family caregivers access key programs, services, and agencies in their communities. A copy of the guide is available by calling 877-333-5885 or online at aarp.org/caregiverresources. AARP supports this show.
We are glad you're with us today on Native America Calling. We're talking about American imperialism. What are your thoughts on how America regards Indigenous people here in the United States and other countries? You can let us know. The number is 1-800-996-2848. That is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. One of our guests on the line today, Tilly Martinussen, is a former member of Greenland's parliament, and she's speaking with us from Nuuk, Greenland. And Tilly, the words you were, before we went to break, you were describing, what would you sell your land? Would you sell your culture? Would you sell your language? Those kinds of words just really, really connect with a lot of our listeners. And you were explaining, your response to President Trump's offer to buy Greenland and independence from Danish control. Go ahead and finish your thoughts there before we move on to the next guest.
Yeah, so what I just wanted to say, of course, it hurts when we're hearing about the Danish Prime Minister only and they're talking about Denmark owning Greenland. Look, if we wanted to, we could have a referendum tomorrow. If our people said yes, we could be independent shortly after that, after referendum in Denmark as well. And they have promised that they, of course, would grant us our freedom the way that we wanted to. But we also, of course, are very dependent economically. I mean, we have 60 to 80% of our financial bill, depending on how you look at it economically, is a block grant from Denmark. But also a lot of families have some Danish in them. So it's not totally opposed to the Danes, but it's also very hurtful that we're not our own people. I mean, we have our own prime minister, we have our own parliament. Of course, we want to be talked about. I mean, it would be fine if they were going, the Danish prime minister and Jens Frederik, and it would be great if they didn't say owned Greenland. I mean, that really is something that I feel is really hurtful. And especially right now, I mean, we have a lot of talks about taboo periods of time that has been between Greenland and Denmark as a former colony, the dark chapters. We're actually debating right now. We're talking about them. We're having historical talks about some of the dark chapters that we have put together with Denmark and trying to mend those wounds. Of course, Denmark and Greenland has been feeling closer together because of this crisis. Nothing unites like an enemy from the outside, right? But to be talked about like we are owned. I mean, not only the land, which is probably what they mean, but that also kind of speaks to a disrespect that is just so ingrained that I don't think that the presenters and the people that are doing it understands this. I mean, I also heard someone say, we have the control of Greenland. Somebody from Danish parliament that also heard. We are a sovereign people, not yet a completely sovereign land, but we are a sovereign people and we do have our own cultures, not at all like the Danish ones. And while I very much like Denmark and very happy with what they're doing right now, I mean, language like that is just detrimental to us as a people.
Thank you, Tilly. 1-800-996-2848. That is the number for listeners to join the conversation. United States taking over Greenland, offering to buy Greenland. What are your thoughts as an Indigenous person? How does that make you feel? Let us know. 1-800-996-2848. Dr. Sarah Ulsvig is another guest on the show. She joins us also in Nuuk, Greenland. And Sarah, you are the chair of the Inuit Circumpolar Council, and your organization works to strengthen Inuit rights at the international level. What leverage right now do Inuit people have in this conversation about American control of Greenland?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to remind that we as Inuit live here in Galashiq Nunaat, Greenland. We are the majority of the population here, 90% approximately. Then we live in Canada, Alaska, which is the US, of course, and Chukotka, Russia. So for us in the Inuit Circumpolar Council, great power rivalry and the geopolitical significance of our Arctic region has been a political precondition based on which we've been able to unite as Inuit across those state borders and also work on unified policies to bring to the international arena where we meet other Indigenous peoples, including Andrea Carmen on the call. Very good to hear your voice, Andrea. For the climate COPs, for UN meetings in other UN agencies and other UN fora, in the Arctic Council and so forth. And it's important to try and envision our land seen from above, try to look at the globe seen with the North Pole in the center, and then you will truly understand how vast a land and water we actually occupy and have lived on for time immemorial. We predate the concepts of states, and therefore it's been really important for us from the Inuit Circumpolar Council to, first of all, address the situation. And I think Tilly spoke to that, but also took sort of a deficit-based approach. We've been trying to take an approach saying that there's simply no such thing as a better colonizer. This is what it's about fundamentally, that we have already been colonized once and we do not want to be colonized again. And we therefore, as I see it, very quickly as Inuit here in Galashiq Nunaat, Greenland, saw through the propaganda, saw through the attempts of using the pain and trauma of previous colonizations against us. We also very clearly stated that we do not wish to be pitted against each other. Inuit in Alaska do not live in reserves. Inuit in Alaska have built a quite expanded or expansive self-determination arrangement in each of their regions. So have Inuit in Canada and in Chukotka in whole other ways. So it's important for us to recognize that our leadership, Inuit leadership, within those realities and within those nation-state borders, have worked with, sweat, hard sweat and tears to establish the self-government arrangements we have today. And we have great respect for that across those state borders. So our approach have been that we don't want to be pitted against each other. We are not going to fall into the pit of speaking state interest towards each other. And on the contrary, we are calling for a dignified dialogue, engagement with us on a diplomatic level. Indigenous peoples, we have been able to build what we have through being diplomatic, and often states don't think we are able to do so, but we are. And Galashitinat Greenland is a very clear example of that. I also wanted to just comment on, the approach of someone saying that you can buy or sell our land and our people. That, of course, gives connotation to how the world looked more than 100 years ago. And therefore, that also to us was very obviously something that symbolized a change in the way that you would consider, your obligations to uphold and abide by international rules-based order. So our call has also been for the U.S. to continue or re-engage internationally and abide by international rules-based order. Because when it comes down to the question of a forceful taking over, we have to maintain the territorial integrity, including the integrity of the nation Galashiq Nunat, which does not exist in an internationally legal void. It exists on the basis of international law, and our nation is built on negotiations with the Danish state. And that's something that we have to continue insisting on.
Sarah, I've heard both you and also Tilly talk quite a bit about Indigenous people here in the U.S., in the lower 48, and also in Alaska. And it really makes me curious to consider and compare our sovereignty here as Indigenous people in the U.S. as compared to Inuit sovereignty in Greenland. And whose would you say overall is stronger? Who do you think has a more control, more autonomy as sovereign people? Native American people here or your own people in Greenland?
Well, I think that question has to be replied not by comparing a people to another people. I have great respect for the work that Indigenous leaders are doing all over the world. We meet on the international arena and we hear about each other's struggles, each other's achievements, each other's challenges in terms of increasing our self-determination. And I think what we bring to the table is to be able to engage with diplomacy on a state level, at the same time as not losing our values in terms of what we consider sovereignty. And that's also what we've done from the Inuit Circumpolar Council, for example, when the Russians did a flag planting at the seabed of the North Pole in the 2000s, in 2007, and the Arctic littoral states, so the coastal states, agreed on a declaration to abide by international rules-based order, but they forgot to invite the Indigenous peoples to the table. Inuit Circumpolar Council issued a declaration of Inuit sovereignty the year after, pointing to our ways of understanding sovereignty and also pointing to the inherentness of our self-determination. And exactly the inherentness of our self-determination is something that we really are very adamant in using and applying here in Galashiq Nunat. We've seen through the political history of Greenland, Galashiq Nunat, that very often the politicians of Galashiq Nunat will go ahead and do things, build markets for the exports of fish, or create new partnerships with the European Union after having taken a decision to leave the European Union early in the 80s. And oftentimes we see that the state perspective would be, well, you can't do that, you're not a state. But here the politicians have said, well, we are just inherently exercising our right of self-determination. And then afterwards, it's been possible to agree on legislative frameworks for having some kind of a common recognition of that power, also recognized by Denmark. So I think it's important for us as Indigenous peoples to remember that the rights were not granted to us. They didn't fall down on our desks because they were written on paper. They are there and they're inherent, and the thing is to exercise them. And that's where we see a very different level of recognition of that from state to state, from region to region. But there are so many complexities in how each people are exercising their rights of self-determination that I do not like to do that comparison. And also, we from the Inuit Circumpolar Council have rejected to be pitted against each other in such a narrative, because it's the narrative of the states to pit us against each other.
Mm-hmm. I apologize. I didn't mean it to sound like pitting Indigenous groups against each other. I just really was kind of trying to think of comparing my own sovereignty in my own perspective as opposed to what is the sovereignty perspective in Greenland, and again, how we connect to, as a Native American person in the United States, and how somebody in Greenland might look at the country of Denmark. But really appreciate this dialogue in your candor, Sarah. And you mentioned a little bit about the history of threats to take over Greenland. Can you give us a little bit more background there and enlighten us on that history as well?
Yes, and definitely, if we just go back to Denmark, the relationship between Greenland and Denmark, and and Inuit in Galashitinat especially, and also Inuit living in Denmark, is really full of challenges and full of issues that we are calling for the Danish state to deal with and take responsibility for. And that work, it has been ongoing for a number of years, irrespectively of the interest that's been expressed from the US. So I think that's an important point to just make sure to do, because obviously Inuit here in Galashitinat have been fighting very long to ensure that our rights are increasingly recognized by the Danish state. But there's also been a blindness from the Danish state side to their own responsibility as a former or a continuous colonial power. And that asymmetric power relation between the colonized and the colonizer is still very visible and tangible. And I think for the same reason, the rhetorics that were used by the US were immediately seen through by the people here. And I think that's a very important point to remember, also falling back on the notion of that there's no such thing as a better colonizer. Mm-hmm. Another thing that made it easy to see through from Galashitinat's side is that we do remember and know the history of US interest in our territory, in our resources, in the geopolitical sort of situational, the place that we are as this big island, sort of forms a kind of a physical shield, against the East, from the US, and also does continue to have a very significant role in ensuring US and North American homeland security. And that goes back decades and decades. You mentioned the 1951 Defense Agreement, or you could also talk about the one prior to that from 1941, the significance of minerals from Galashitinat, especially the cryolite mineral, in the US's ability to produce aluminum for the Second World War airplanes is something we have not forgotten. We've also seen how the US State Department issued big reports in the 1860s when they had mapped the resources, living and non-living, of Galashitinat, Greenland. And we've also seen the reports and studied, for example, the knowledge we have about a US president floating the idea of purchasing Greenland already in 1832. So the interest from the US, which is informed and driven by the US's interest to secure access to Galashitinat, Greenland for basing rights, mostly for the US's own homeland security, is something that's been there as a constant for Greenland for many, many years. And politically, that's something that Greenland has also engaged with the US in indirect negotiations to ensure a stronger tie, but also to ensure that the US would take that conversation directly with the people of Kalaallit Nunaat and not so much through Denmark. And therefore, there is an element in this situation that also falls back on the whole issue of independence. It is exactly the issue of independence that has created a room for questioning who controls Greenland. And we cannot forget that. And that's a big lesson to everyone, all indigenous peoples, that when we talk about political independence, it's necessary that we also explain what it means to us. Mm-hmm. Here we have now a situation where it's right in our face. And politicians here in Kalaallit Nunaat therefore should understand the link between the aspiration of becoming an independent state at the same time as our nation having that role for one of the greatest powers in terms of military power in the world, which is the US, which therefore also puts some limits to what, rooms for maneuvering politically Greenland has. And that is something that we in our diplomatic toolbox need to use in that engagement. So it is not super simple, all of this. And therefore, we need to look at how the negotiations will continue in between Nuuk and Washington, D.C. and Copenhagen. And they are
thank
ongoing.
you, Sarah. We have to take another break, but we're going to come back. We'll continue this conversation. We have more guests to talk to. And, of course, the phone lines are open for listeners who would like to join us. 1-800-99-NATIVE.
Skugtash. For more than 40 years, Ramona Farms has revived ancient traditional foods, tepary beans, pinoli, polentas, and more, all from store.ramonafarms.com. Ramona Farms supports this show. Tom Nye.
Kaufman & Associates has over 35 years of experience serving Indian country, supporting growth, transformation, and sustainability of tribal programs. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce, and we're talking with our guest today about what could be called modern American imperialism. Plenty of time for those of you who would like to join the conversation. Let us know your thoughts, let us know your perspectives, or ask a question. The number is 1-800-996-2848. Our next guest, Malu Rosing, joins us now from Copenhagen, Denmark. She is an advisor on Arctic and global governance for the International Work Group for Indigenous Affairs. And Malu, in a Guardian op-ed, you wrote that Greenlandic people were feeling unsafe. What worst-case scenarios are being discussed right now?
Previously to Donald Trump taking the option of military force off the table, people were genuinely concerned about a U.S. invasion in Greenland. I know some people were starting to prep for an invasion, for a possible invasion. People were really scared what was going to happen, if like what was about to happen with their life, with the communities we have built. Just a general fear of some sort of military overtaking by the U.S. and what that could possibly look like.
Again, I keep thinking of different parallels between Indigenous people in other parts of the world. And, there's always that militant side of Indigenous relations and folks that, feel very threatened and maybe feel, inspired or feel an obligation. Is there any talk amongst folks there in Greenland about establishing militias or about, waging some sort of a defense against perhaps in the event of a military onslaught?
Of course, there were also conversations of what to do in that if that happened. I know a lot of people felt very very proud of the country and felt very close to the nature and close to the culture and sort of engaged with the fact that we could survive in the Arctic which is not very easy, and that we've been surviving in the Arctic for thousands of years. So that sort of came up as well. You saw that a lot in on social media, how proud we were of the culture that we have. And surviving in the Arctic.
Malu, we've heard the term world order disruption on this show today. How does this disruption affect Indigenous people, and where Indigenous people see their place in the world order right now?
It's something we keep hearing leaders say, that something has changed the fundamentals of geopolitics in the world. And that's a reality we have to be aware of, and we are very much aware of it. We're very much aware that this is a situation that is very important, not just to us, but to the rest of the world. And I think it gives us as Greenlandic people, but also Indigenous peoples all over, sort of a possibility to show, like Sarah said, to show that we are part of this very big. We're part of this international community, almost of 500 million Indigenous people, and I think we can. It's important that we show up for each other, and that we speak up for our rights in situations like these.
Right. And you mentioned 500 million Indigenous people worldwide. And do you think that number, all of these Indigenous groups throughout the world, do they add leverage to what stakeholders are discussing right now, specifically in Greenland?
I think so. I think one really important thing that has happened in this situation is that the Greenlandic Inuit are getting a lot of support from Indigenous peoples' organizations and groups from all over the world. And it's really it's very moving in this time, and it's very energizing to see all this solidarity and support that Greenland Inuit, Galaslit Inuit are receiving from all over the world. So I think it's really important to just be aware of this community, and I love this sort of program that you're also having here, where we get to talk to each other, and where we get to sort of share experiences and to gain a voice together.
Absolutely. Malu, what type of feedback are you getting from your recent op-ed?
I am getting a lot of positive feedback, I have to say. It's really nice to see. Positive feedback. There are also some negative feedback, but it's the majority of what I'm getting is positive, and it's also from other Indigenous organizations or Indigenous groups that just want to share their solidarity with Greenland and the situation currently.
All right. Thank you, Malu. And you mentioned Indigenous people across the world. And let's talk more about how some of these recent imperialist policies could be impacting or could potentially impact other Indigenous populations. And to do that, I want to bring our fourth guest into the conversation now, Andrea Carmen, who is in Tucson, Arizona, and the executive director of the International Indian Treaty Council. And Andrea, President Trump's ambition toward this takeover of Greenland, it brings other countries into the discussion. There's Cuba, Colombia, Panama, and of course the recent events in Venezuela. You network with Indigenous people across the globe. You know our guests who are on the show as well. What's the reaction when Indigenous groups in other parts of the world hear this type of talk right now?
Well, thank you very much for asking me. to be able to express our solidarity with the Inuit peoples. Don't forget to say peoples, not groups or people even, because all peoples have the right to self-determination under international law. And that includes covenants and international conventions that the United States is legally party to, as well as, of course, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I want to congratulate your station, your program, for bringing this to light, because I've been, of course, looking at the news, hearing about what's going on and these threats from the current U.S. administration to take over one way or another the sovereign territory, the sovereign Inuit territory of Greenland. And it's amazing, even in the so-called more liberal-leaning mainstream media, everybody's talking about this is the property of Denmark, this is territory of Denmark, it's going to disrupt NATO. I've been waiting for somebody to recognize that there is a sovereign, autonomous, home rule government controlled by the Inuit peoples who have always, since time immemorial, as Sarah said, lived on that land. Mm-hmm. And it actually went through a UN process, decolonization under the UN Charter, that was also supposed to be applied to Alaska and Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Guam, other places where we know the Indigenous peoples very well, where we have affiliates. And those places, Hawaii and Alaska in particular, had statehood imposed on them. They were not allowed to go through that process that Greenland Inuit were able to go through to achieve homeland rule on the process of independence. The right to self-determination says that all peoples have the right to freely determine their political status. And of course, that goes to Indigenous peoples here in what's now called the United States. I remember in this conversation, all of the treaties, more than 300 nation-to-nation treaties that are still legally binding under international law that the United States signed and concluded with Indigenous nations on their westward expansion. And some of them were just pass-through treaties, the Treaty of Ruby Valley, to allow them to go and participate in the gold rush, which is another story of genocide in California.
Andrea, I need to ask, is there any upside that we need to consider in some of these countries, again, across the world, looking at countries that have Indigenous peoples across the world, any upside to American imperialism in any situations? Because I'm really thinking right now about places, countries where Indigenous people are not entirely benefiting from their leadership, such as Venezuela, for example.
Well, the International Indian Treaty Council firmly reiterates the position that has been expressed by our brothers and sisters, Inuit peoples of Greenland, that no colonizer is a positive step forward, that they don't want to trade one colonizer for another. And colonization is one of the evils that has affected and impacted negatively Indigenous peoples around the world. And we have to see this in the light, just like the gold rush in California. Now our Yaqui territories are being impacted by proposed lithium mining in Sonora, Mexico, just right across the border from where I'm sitting right now in Tucson, Arizona. They're looking at these critical minerals in Greenland and many other places. We really feel like the main reason behind all of these threats, which include Panama again, now Mexico, Colombia, and many other places, including Greenland, is really, for an economic push for these so-called, critical minerals. It's for economic expansion, and all of these territories have been threatened by the United States. I was just in Panama last February after the United States declared that they were going to invade and take the canal back. The Kuna General Congress, the traditional government there, are affiliates of IATC, and they don't see this as a joke or a bargaining chip. They remember when the U.S. invaded Panama in, I think, 1989. And the threat of military expansion by the United States for the purpose of economic development, as well as I'm not sure what kind of political imperialism the other motivations might be. But we as Indigenous peoples in this land, now called the United States, were the first victims of U.S. imperialism, and it hasn't really stopped in terms of trying to access our land for economic development, for mineral development. They want to upstart uranium mining again. In New Mexico, lithium mining is being imposed on Indigenous peoples despite their protests in Nevada. This is continuing for all of us, and we have to stand in solidarity with each other. Right now, Greenland is the topic of conversation, and I will speak for the International Indian Treaty Council, but I know I'm also speaking for the International Indigenous Peoples Movement, that we stand firmly behind their right for self-determination as affirmed in international law, but also our inherent rights as Indigenous peoples to continue to be who we are and decide what our political status should be everywhere.
Andrea, for Native peoples in the United States, or as you referred to it, what is now the United States, what do you hear from most of them with regard to any talk of taking control of a sovereign nation, whether it be in Greenland, whether it be in another part of the world, or even the possibility that it could at some point happen here in the United States again?
Well, we co-sponsor the Otete-Sakoan gathering that happens every December with the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota peoples. This time it was in Rapid City, and I think December 15th to 17th. And the firm affirmation of what was called the Great Sioux Nation when the treaty was concluded in 1868 with the U.S. government is the Black Hills are not for sale. All of that money is still in the bank that was offered by the United States in exchange for buying their land, which was never for sale. Indigenous peoples do not change in our relationship to our traditional homelands, as was mentioned by the other guests, our language, our culture, our ceremonies, our ceremonial places, our sacred places. They are not for sale.
Andrea, are you talking with people, any Native people here in the U.S., though, that are more concerned, more worried that this imperialism could turn back against Native American people in the U.S. and seriously threaten and jeopardize our sovereignty in a way we haven't experienced in hundreds of years? I mean, a doomsday type of scenario.
Absolutely. Yeah. This reality has never left Indigenous peoples. It wasn't that long ago. And like I said, they're still threatening, or planning, not threatening, but planning to expand and establish uranium mining again, where they haven't even recovered from the first wave, the Pueblo and Dene Navajo peoples, in the name of transition minerals and economic development and national security, all of those things. It hasn't changed. Look what's happening, with Lakota people still in ICE custody. The First Nations of this land are being taken into custody, along with Indigenous peoples, from other southern places that have come here. So, we are faced with this now. It hasn't really ended. And I think we have to recognize that these imperialist tendencies are what the U.S. was based on. It's never dealt with the history of genocide and slavery that established the country. Indigenous peoples are very willing to engage in a new kind of relationship, a respectful, sovereign to sovereign, nation to nation relationship that the treaties affirmed.
All right. We're going to have to wrap up this conversation. We are out of time, but thanks to all of our guests today, Andrea Carmen, Malu Rosing, Tilly Martinussen, and Dr. Sarah Olsvig. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about the legacy of the man who shaped Indigenous journalism in Canada. Hope you'll tune in. I'm Sean Spruce.
Repatriation is the return of ancestors and stolen culture. The Association on American Indian Affairs is hosting the 11th annual Repatriation Conference, Feeding the Fire, Advancing the Movement, in February 2026. This fully virtual conference will offer small group interactive workshops, strategies, networking, and more to advance domestic and international repatriation. More at Indian-Affairs.org. The association supports this show.
The faculty of tribal colleges and universities support their students in countless ways. They say I believe and offer help before it's asked.
Hear that? That's everything tribal college faculty do for their students on Fast Forward. Because if one tried to say it in real time, they'd be here all day. They teach, guide, comfort, and connect. And for that, the community is grateful. Learn more at mostthoroughdjobdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
They give extensions, cheer progress, share laughter, create calm, and allow reflection. They inspire hope, share wisdom, guide gently, validate feelings.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Quantic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.